I said you will wash my clothes before I return. Are you deaf? Useless man. How many times have I told you not to do that? You never listen to me. Get up! You cannot feed yourself, yet you cannot obey.
The people of Lagos often say that wealth can build a house, but it cannot build peace within it. In the crowded heart of the city, where the noise of danfo buses and hawkers filled the air from morning till night, there stood an old compound known for many things, but most especially for the house of Sade and her husband, Kunle. Sade was not a woman anyone could ignore. She was tall, broad, and heavy. Her voice carried like a drumbeat, sharp and commanding. She owned 2 shops in the market and several rooms in the compound, which she rented out. Money came to her easily, and because of that, pride sat on her shoulders like a crown she refused to remove. Kunle, her husband, was the complete opposite. He was short and slim, with shoulders that seemed to bend under the weight of life itself. His clothes often hung loosely on him, and his voice was soft, almost like he was afraid of being heard. Once he had dreams of building something of his own, but those dreams had slowly faded, like chalk washed away by rain. In the early days of their marriage, people wondered how such 2 different souls found each other. Some said it was love, others said it was desperation. But as time passed, the truth began to show itself in ways no one could ignore. Every morning before the sun fully rose, Kunle would already be awake. He would sweep the compound, his small frame moving quietly so as not to disturb his wife. After that, he would fetch water, wash plates, cook, and even wash Sade's clothes, bending over buckets for hours until his fingers wrinkled like old leaves. And still, it was never enough. "Sade, I have finished washing your clothes," he would say gently, standing at a distance as if approaching a queen. But Sade would barely look at him. "Did you clean the kitchen?" she would snap. "Yes, I did." "And the bathroom?" "Yes, I did that too." She would hiss loudly. "Then why are you standing there like a useless goat? Go and iron my clothes." Kunle would nod quickly and rush off, his heart beating fast. Fear had become his daily companion. The neighbors saw everything. Mama Bisi, an elderly woman who had lived in the compound for over 20 years, would often sit outside her door, chewing bitter kola and watching quietly. "This is not how a home should be," she would mutter. "A man is not a slave." But whenever someone tried to speak up, Sade would shut them down immediately. "Is it your husband? Did you feed him? Did you marry him? Mind your business." And so, people learned to keep their distance. One evening, after a long day in the market, Sade returned home in a foul mood. The heat had been unbearable, and one of her customers had argued with her over price. She stormed into the compound, her footsteps heavy, her face dark with anger. Kunle rushed to greet her. "Welcome, my wife," he said softly, reaching to take her bag. But before his hand could touch it, slap! The sound echoed loudly. "You useless man, why is the food not ready?" she shouted. Kunle staggered back, holding his cheek. I was about to finish it." "About to?" she interrupted, her eyes blazing. "So I will come and be waiting in my own house?" "No, please, just give me a few minutes." She didn't wait. She grabbed the nearest object, a wooden spoon, and began to hit him. Kunle cried out, raising his arms to shield himself. "Please, I'm sorry. I will do it now." But Sade's anger had already taken over. The compound fell silent again, just like it always did. Inside, something was breaking. Not just Kunle's body, but his spirit. That night, after Sade had eaten and gone to sleep, Kunle sat alone outside. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale light over the compound. He held his bruised arm, wincing slightly. From a distance, Mama Bisi watched him. After a while, she walked slowly towards him and sat beside him. "My son," she said gently, "how long will you continue like this?" Kunle didn't answer immediately. He stared at the ground, his eyes tired. "I don't know, Mama," he whispered. She sighed deeply. A house where there is no peace is not a home. Even a goat will run away from where it is beaten every day. Kunle swallowed hard, her words sinking deep into his heart. "But where will I go?" he asked. "I have nothing, no money, no place." Mama Bisi placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes having nothing is better than losing yourself completely." Her words stayed with him long after she left. Days turned to weeks and nothing changed. If anything, Sade became worse. She insulted him in front of others, called him names, and reminded him constantly of his failure as a man. "You cannot even feed yourself. What kind of husband are you?" she would shout. Each word cut deeper than the last. But something had started to grow inside Kunle, a quiet realization. One afternoon, while washing clothes under the hot sun, Kunle paused. Sweat dripped down his face and his hands were sore. He looked at the bucket, then at his reflection in the water. For a moment, he didn't recognize the man staring back at him. "Is this who I have become?" he murmured. That night, Sade returned home again, angry as usual. "Why is the house still dirty?" she snapped. "I cleaned it," Kunle replied softly. She looked around, then scoffed. "You call this clean? You are truly useless." She raised her hand again, but this time, Kunle did not move. He stood still, his eyes no longer filled with fear, but with something else, something new, something Sade had never seen before. It confused her for a moment, but then she slapped him anyway. The sound echoed. Kunle slowly turned his face back toward her, and for the first time in a very long time, he said nothing. No apology, no pleading, just silence. That silence was the beginning of something Sade did not understand. And deep within Kunle's heart, a decision was slowly shaping up. A decision that would change everything. The night after that silence was heavy. So heavy that even the walls of the compound seemed to hold their breath. Kunle did not sleep. He lay on the thin mat in the corner of the room, staring into the darkness while Sade snored loudly on the bed. Every part of his body ached, but it was not the pain that kept him awake. It was the thoughts. For the first time in years, his mind was louder than his fear. Mama Bisi's voice echoed again and again in his head. Sometimes, having nothing is better than losing yourself completely. Kunle turned slowly, looking at Sade. She slept peacefully. The same hands that beat him mercilessly during the day now rested calmly by her side. Her face, free from anger, almost looked kind, but Kunle knew better. He had seen the other side too many times. A deep breath escaped his lips. "I cannot die here," he whispered to himself. The words felt strange, but powerful. He sat up quietly. The room was small. Just a bed, a wooden chair, and a corner where his few belongings were kept. He reached for his old nylon bag and began to pack what little he had. 2 worn shirts, a pair of trousers, and a small photograph from long ago. It was a picture of him as a young man, smiling, standing proudly beside a bicycle he once owned. He stared at it for a long moment. "I will find that man again," he said softly. Outside, the compound was silent. The usual noise of Lagos had faded into the distance, leaving only the sound of crickets and the occasional barking of a stray dog. Kunle stood up, his heart beating fast. He looked at Sade one last time. She did not move. No goodbye, no words, just a quiet ending to a painful chapter. And then he walked out. The early morning air was cool as Kunle stepped into the streets of Lagos, his small bag slung over his shoulder. The sky was just beginning to lighten, and the city was slowly waking up. For a moment, he stopped. He had no destination, no plan. Only one thing was certain. He was not going back. As he began to walk, fear tried to creep in again. Where will you sleep? What will you eat? Who will help you? But this time, he pushed those thoughts aside. Anything is better than that life, he muttered. Hours passed. The sun rose fully and the streets became alive with movement. Okada riders shouting for passengers, traders arranging their goods, and buses honking endlessly. Kunle walked until his legs felt weak. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but he ignored it. By midday, he found himself in a quieter part of the city, a neighborhood less crowded, with small shops and modest houses. He sat down under a tree, exhausted. For a while, he just watched people pass. Then his eyes caught something. A small food stall. The smell of hot rice and stew filled the air, making his stomach twist painfully. Behind the stall was a woman. She was not dressed richly, but she looked neat and calm. Her body was full and strong, even heavier than Sade's, but there was something different about her presence. She was laughing, not the harsh, mocking laughter Kunle was used to, but a soft, warm one. A customer said something and she smiled as she served him. Kunle watched quietly. Something about her felt safe. He didn't realize how long he had been staring until her voice broke his thoughts. "You there," she called gently. "Why are you looking at my food like that? Come closer." Kunle froze. For a moment he thought he had done something wrong, but her face held no anger. Slowly he stood up and walked towards her. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." She raised her hand slightly, stopping him. "It's okay," she said. "You look hungry." Kunle lowered his eyes, embarrassed. I am." Without another word, she turned, scooped some rice and stew into a plate, and handed it to him. "Sit," she said, pointing to a small bench. Kunle hesitated. "I don't have money." "I didn't ask you for money," she replied calmly. He looked at her confused. "Eat first." Slowly, he took the plate and sat down. The first bite nearly brought tears to his eyes. It had been a long time he ate without fear, without rushing, without being shouted at. As he ate, the woman watched him quietly. "My name is Amaka," she said after a while. Kunle nodded and swallowed. "I'm Kunle." "You are not from around here," she observed. "No, I just came." She tilted her head slightly. "Running from something?" Kunle paused. For a moment, he didn't know what to say, but something about her made it easy. "Yes," he admitted. She didn't press further. Instead, she simply nodded. "Then you are welcome here." Those words hit him deeply. "You are welcome." It was such a simple sentence, yet it felt like something he hadn't heard in years. After he finished eating, Kunle stood up. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I don't know how to repay you." Amaka wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him. "Can you walk?" she asked. Kunle blinked.
Yes, I can do anything. She studied him for a moment. Good, she said. I need help here. Kunle's heart skipped. You mean I can stay? For now, she replied, but no laziness. I don't like that. A small smile appeared on Kunle's face. I will not disappoint you. And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. Back at the old compound, Sade woke up late that morning. She stretched and sat up, frowning. Kunle, she shouted. No answer. Kunle, silence. Annoyed, she got out of bed and walked around the house. The kitchen was empty. The bathroom was empty. The compound, empty. Her frown deepened. Where is that useless man? She muttered. She waited. Minutes passed. By afternoon, the truth began to settle in. Kunle was gone. At first, she scoffed. Good riddance, she said loudly. Let him go and see how the world will deal with him. But as the days stretched on, something unfamiliar crept into her chest. The house felt different, too quiet, too still. That evening, for the first time in years, Sade washed her own plate. And as she stood there, scrubbing in silence, a strange feeling settled over her. Not anger, not pride, but something she could not yet name. Something that had just begun and would only grow stronger with time.
Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. But in two different places in Lagos, two very different lives were unfolding. Kunle's life, once filled with fear and pain, slowly began to change in ways he never imagined. Every morning now, he woke up not to shouting or blows, but to the soft clatter of pots and the gentle voice of Amaka calling out to customers. The small food stall had become more than just a place of work, it had become a place of peace. At first, Kunle walked like a man trying to prove his worth to the world. He walked before everyone, swept the surroundings, fetched water, arranged the benches and helped cook. He did everything with care, as though afraid that one mistake might send him back to the life he escaped. But Amaka was not Sade. She did not shout, she did not insult, and she never raised her hand against him. Instead, she watched. One afternoon, as Kunle struggled to carry a heavy pot, Amaka stepped forward. Leave that, she said. I can do it, Kunle replied quickly, almost panicking. I didn't say you can't. I said, leave it. You are not here to suffer. Kunle froze. Those words, they confused him. Not here to suffer. He had almost forgotten what back meant. Slowly, he stepped back. Amaka carried the pot herself with ease, then turned to him. Work is good, but you are a human being first. Don't forget that. Kunle nodded slowly, her words settling deep inside him. From that day, something changed. He no longer walked out of fear. He walked with dignity. Customers began to notice him. The young man is hardworking, some would say. He is respectful, others added. Little by little, the stall became more popular. People came not just for the food, but for the atmosphere, the laughter, the peace, the quiet kindness that filled the space. And Kunle began to smile again. At first, it felt strange on his face, but soon it became natural. One evening, after they had closed for the day, Kunle sat with Amaka outside the store. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Thank you, he said suddenly. Amaka looked at him. For what? For everything, he replied. You didn't know me, but you helped me. She smiled softly. Not everyone deserves to suffer, Kunle. He hesitated, then asked, Why did you trust me? Amaka shrugged lightly.
I didn't trust you at first. I just saw someone who needed help. The rest, you proved yourself." Kunle lowered his head, humbled. After a moment, Amaka spoke again. "You can stay here as long as you want. This place is yours too." Kunle looked up surprised. "Mine?" "Yes," she said. "We build together." Those words warmed his heart in a way he could not explain. And in that moment, Kunle realized something important. He had not just found a place to stay, he had found a place to belong. Meanwhile, in the old compound, Sade's life had taken a very different turn. At first, she carried on as usual. She went to the market, shouted at customers, and returned home with money. She told herself she was better off without Kunle. But slowly, things began to change. The house was always quiet. Too quiet. No one swept the compound early in the morning. No one fetched water. No one prepared her meals. At first, she managed, but the stress began to show. One evening, after a long day at the market, she returned home exhausted. She dropped her bag and sat down heavily. "Kunle," she shouted out of habit. Silence. Her face tightened. She stood up angrily and went to the kitchen. Everything was exactly as she left it. No food, no water, nothing. She hissed loudly and began to cook, grumbling to herself. This is how he will suffer out there. Let him see life. But as she cooked alone, the silence pressed in on her. For the first time, she felt it. Loneliness. Days passed, then weeks, then months. People in the compound began to keep their distance. Without Kunle's quiet presence, Sade's harshness became more obvious. She argued more, shouted more, and gradually people stopped engaging with her. Even in the market, customers began to avoid her stall. "Her attitude is too much," some said. "I would rather buy elsewhere," others whispered. Sade noticed, but instead of changing, she grew more bitter. Until one night, she sat alone in her large room. The money she had made was piled in a corner. Her properties were still hers, but something was missing. Something money could not buy. She looked around the empty house, and for the first time in her life, tears filled her eyes. "What have I done?" she whispered. Memories began to flood her mind. Kunle sweeping quietly in the mornings, Kunle rushing to greet her, Kunle begging for mercy. Her chest tightened. "I drove him away," she said, her voice breaking. But it was too late. No one came to visit. No man came to marry her. No child filled her home with laughter. Only silence remained. Heavy, endless. Back at the food stall, life continued to blossom. Kunle had grown stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. His shoulders were no longer bent, his voice was no longer timid, and his eyes no longer carried fear. One day, as he stood serving customers, Amaka watched him from a distance and smiled. "You have changed," she said. Kunle nodded. "Yes, I have." After a pause, he added, "Because someone showed me kindness." Amaka looked at him thoughtfully. "And will you show that same kindness to others?" she asked. Kunle smiled. "I will." And so, the story spread quietly throughout Lagos, of a man who left suffering and found peace, of a woman who had everything but lost what mattered most. The elders would later say, "A home built on fear will always fall, but a home built on kindness will stand the test of time." And in the end, that was the lesson, that power without compassion leads to loneliness, and that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever. If this story touched your heart and you enjoyed every moment of it, don't forget to like this video, thumbs up, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe to African Folk Tales by Nikki for more powerful, emotional, and unforgettable stories from Africa. Your support means everything.